Oftentimes on this channel, I talk about how things can be more challenging for some people than for others. But today, we will be talking about something that makes it a bit more tricky for me. First, if you'd be so kind, I ask you to imagine a freshman in high school. But before we get into all this storytelling, I do want to say nobody expected a video essay. Neither did I, but here we are. So let's get back to our freshman. As teenagers are, she's excited to start giving her life a tiny bit more direction. Before enrolling, usually there is a set of criteria that people have to meet, and some of it is quite medical. To make it clear, I will tell you a story of a past student of the Royal Academy of Music. In this case, the Academy almost turned down a gifted percussionist due to being skeptical of a deaf musician's future. Initially unable to enter the Royal Academy of Music or the Royal College of Music, the Academy changed their mind about Evelyn's deafness being a problem and offered her a second chance. Evelyn quickly proved to be a pioneering musician, developing relationships with performing groups around London. The reason I haven't mentioned this story is because Evelyn's TED Talk popped up on my homepage whenever I was first adjusting to my hearing aids. I was fascinated by the philosophy of this wonderful musician and generally her thinking about sound. It was very interesting to me and something I haven't really seen before. And policies of the unis that I mentioned have changed, and one of the pioneers helping do that was in fact Evelyn. But many places in the world still don't give people access that they might deserve. Of the 90 college instrumental music students who participated, 12% reported a history of hearing loss, and over 1/3 reported tinnitus. 77% of participants had never received any training about hearing health, and only a small percentage of students used a hearing protection device. The most cited reason for lack of protection use was its negative impact on sound quality. However, group differences were noted between brass, woodwind, and percussion musicians in terms of hearing protection device usage. Conclusion. Improving the type of information disseminated to college musicians may reduce the risk of ear-related deficits, noise dosage information, and use of hearing protective devices information, and prevention education grounded in theories like the health belief model may increase awareness and promote greater use of a hearing protection device in this population. Tinnitus and hypersensitivity to sound were observed in a significant minority within a group of non-professional pop rock musicians who had experienced repeated exposure to intense sound levels over at least 5 years. But this is with minimal impact on their lives. Moreover, hearing loss was minimal in the subjects who always used ear protection, being only 0.9 decibels higher than the control group. In contrast, hearing loss was significantly more pronounced at 6.7 decibels higher than the control group in those musicians who never used ear protection. Continued education about the risk to hearing and benefits of the persistent use of ear protection is warranted for musicians who are exposed frequently to intense sound levels. The clinician, although challenged by patients' reports, can advocate for exposure and participation, rather than allowing the patient to settle for avoidance and overprotection. The emotional and functional aspects of hearing loss and tinnitus need not eliminate the patient positive aspects of music listening. And that's not all. This story gets even trickier and more interesting. As we talk about, musical hallucinations have a compelling sense of reality and are often mistaken for real music, until it becomes clear that none is being played. This is especially true when musical hallucinations are experienced for the first time. The sounds are typically heard as short fragments of simple melodies, often from music heard regularly and familiar from youth, especially in form of hymns and carols, and again, as I've noted, music heard from youth. Individuals with hearing loss sometimes notice that music in these hallucinations sounds as it did when it was first heard, and not how it would with their current hearing level. Musical ear syndrome is when someone hears music that's obviously not there. Some people hear a single instrument playing a simple melody, some hear several instruments playing a complex piece of music, and still others hear a voice singing with or without accompaniment. How is this different to when you can't get a piece of music out of your head? Well, in case of MES, the melody sounds like it's coming from an obvious and specific direction, so it's not clear that it's internal. The most common hypothesis about what causes MES is, in layman's terms, that the brain gets bored through sensory deprivation and starts to generate sound by itself. Okay then, using ear protection is a good idea, and some people hear music where there is none being played, but we should get back to the story about the percussionist from the beginning, because schoolwork itself can sometimes be a reason to ring the "I need classroom adjustments" bell. Strong sound input reduces the amount of predicting required by your brain. When you don't get enough sound input, however, your brain has to do more predicting to make sense of the sound input that it's receiving. There are various types of hearing loss, but I'll refer to a partial or total inability to hear. Students may either have genetic hearing loss or acquired hearing loss, which may be due to illness or an accident. Hearing loss can be in one or both ears. It can be temporary or permanent, so it's not you totally hear or you don't hear anything whatsoever. The impact of hearing loss can affect a student's ability to learn. Many students with hearing loss may find the acoustics in a classroom challenging. Captions, interpreters, hearing devices like hearing aids or cochlear implants are only some of the options available to those students. In contrast to the negative impact experienced by musicians, a small number of musicians reported that their profession could be beneficial in managing tinnitus. Participant number 2. Fortunately, being a musician and being surrounded by sound means that I often don't notice my tinnitus. Playing music masks the tinnitus. It's when I stop that it starts to impact my life. The impact of tinnitus on personal life. For many participants, tinnitus hindered social life and led to avoidance of certain events or settings, which in turn led to feelings of isolation. One participant specified that their tinnitus was often worsened by the levels of stress they experienced in social situations. Thinking of all this leads me to ask a tiny question. How stressful is tinnitus for people? Researchers suggest that stress and anxiety are possible causes of tinnitus, but they're not sure how or why. Another 2018 study found that otologic symptoms like dizziness and tinnitus are associated with emotional stress. This kind of stress can worsen your tinnitus symptoms. Researchers say one reason for this is that tinnitus may act as an alarm signal when you're reacting to stressful situations, especially during the onset of stress. Fine, I hear you. I'm stopping with the study citing and getting to the talk about me. Although all this is personal stories and anecdotal evidence, if you will, in all honesty, I deeply relate to a lot of the participants asking people to repeat or not being sure if you are hearing high-pitched noise in your head or if other people can hear it as well. It's tricky, to say the least. Finishing the hearing test and being told that there is a chance I won't be able to enter high school I wanted to attend since I was 11 was probably one of the most memorable moments in my whole academic life. Luckily, I did a test again and the results were not perfect, but the hearing loss wasn't significant enough for me to get in. Regardless of all that, as my hearing got worse, it took a toll on my comfort and confidence in some technical aspects of my schoolwork. Listening fatigue slowly started to be part of my life. whether that be in conversation or during solfeggio lessons. Now I have one more year left of that dream high school, and my academic plans for the future have shifted a lot. I have learned about stress, uncertainty, and tinnitus. That being said, I don't want to discourage any musicians from sticking to the dream of pursuing academy. In fact, I might do that as well if my plan A fails. I have also learned a lot about human willingness to help and vulnerability of being on the receiving end of that help. Sometimes having to disclose that you wear hearing aids to nearly a complete stranger. Fun anecdote, once they got stuck in my hair and I was terrified that they fell on the ground and got all dirty. The most important bit of this whole video has a far more simple message than all the studies I've tried to cite. It's about change and our ability to adapt to it, sometimes even rapidly. Being able to find nuggets of calm when your head is filled with constant noise is truly an art form. So I would invite people dealing with tinnitus, hearing loss, or both, which there's a whole story of how they both are kind of intertwined sometimes, to consider inclusion and trust in a world that has more than enough of the opposite. Sometimes it really is as simple as asking, is it listening fatigue again today? I can't speak for everyone who has tinnitus, but I personally really do welcome questions. And what I can say without any hesitation is that communicating clearly, whether through art or in life in general, is very important for everyone and is something everybody deserves. That's it. Thank you for watching my first ever video essay. See you next time.